politics, sports, movies. You're listening to the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast.
Welcome to the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. My name is Frank, and I'm the host of the show. Thank you for listening. If this is your first time listening, thanks for checking the show out. If you're a return listener, thanks for coming back and continuing to listen. The show is available on the following apps: Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and CastBox. If you listen to the show using one of these apps, please click subscribe, and this will allow you to receive notifications when new episodes are uploaded. You can also listen to episodes on the show's Facebook page, which can be found by searching for Let Me Bend Your Ear. Episodes are also available on the show's YouTube channel. Just search for Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. This podcast covers 3 different topics: politics, sports, and movies. Each episode is dedicated to one of these topics. You can also follow the show on social media. The handle for Twitter is @BendYourEarPod. This is also the handle for Instagram. If you want to email the show, the email is bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. If you're not using a podcasting app to listen to the show, you can always get episodes directly from the website, which is located at www.letmebendYourEar.com. All right, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have back today for this recording, Niamh. If you listen to episode 65, which is the latest episode up now, it was another episode that she hosted of Hidden Horror Gems, where she talked about I Still Know What You Did Last Summer and I Know What You Did Last Summer, the movie and its sequel. So check out that episode. And as you know, she is a big time horror movie buff, and it was actually her suggestion that we kind of delve into 90s horror films, which was an interesting choice because I know when we've talked about movies before, we've talked about some of the older ones. So it's kind of good to get to at least, even though these are the beginning movies are more than 20 years old, at least it's a little more contemporary than something like Halloween. But before we even get into that, let me introduce Niamh. And Niamh, tell everybody where they can find your blog and how to reach you on social media.
Oh, hiya. As you just said, I've got my true crime blog. It's crimeinmypocket.com. And you can follow that then on Twitter and Instagram, and that's at Crime in My Pocket.
Perfect. And like I said, definitely check out our blog. I read her latest blog. Actually, talk about your latest one, because I actually read it last week and it was very interesting. Just talk about that one. I don't know if remember it was a repost or a brand new one, but about the female killer in England. Can you just give a little brief recap of that one so people can check it out?
It is actually one of my favourites to see. Is Joanna Dennehy, or the case is known over here as the Peterborough ditch murders, because obviously they found the bodies in the ditches. And I always enjoy female serial killers because there's not a lot of data on them really, so they're always quite interesting. It seems to be like a lot of the data that's already been collected is on the male ones, so there's not much on females, so it's always interesting. And this is one of my favorites because it is a wild case. It's crazy because she was just so unapologetic for what she did to those men, just completely like just as an example, when she went on the run when the bodies were found and everything, and she started killing people. She went on a bit of a rampage, and she went to attack this man and took his dog. And she still had the dog, which she was taken into custody. And she was asking the police officers if the dog was okay after just stabbing 3 people. It's an absolutely crazy case. It's really worth checking out. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, no, when I was reading it, just the shocking nature. And like you said, I think that's why people have a fascination kind of true crime and specifically serial killers. And I think this is a good example. And it's, like you said, 2 things. One, female serial killers are highly unusual. I mean, rare is probably a better term. And reading this story, it's if you would have just assumed, had you not known the name or the sex of the killer, that it was just another male serial killer. So it is more interesting that it was a female. When I was reading your blog, and what you do so well is it's just basically just and that's where I think, people have trouble reconciling. We always want to have, well, why did somebody do this? Is there a motive? And a lot of times it's just because they're just not, whatever it is, it's not wired correctly. They're just not, whatever that is. There's really no concrete answer to that question. And unfortunately, like you said, they're just victims that are unfortunately terrorized by someone like this. But yeah, definitely check it out if you're a true crime fan. Definitely check out her blog. Her writing's fantastic. She does a lot of, if you read it, you can tell the research that she puts into it. So definitely check that out. All right. So what we're going to get into today, and I'm looking forward to it, as I stated earlier, we're talking about 90s horror. So before we get into it a little bit, I want to go a little background on it. And then Niamh, you can always jump in on anything because I know you're an expert on this. At this time in the probably early to mid 90s, I think a lot of people, especially horror fans like yourself, would agree that mainstream horror, in the sense that nothing, like cult favorites, horror was kind of in a down time.
Mm.
I think there wasn't really a lot of really great horror movies that had come out. Like I said, I'm not a horror buff. The ones pre-Scream, the one I remember the most was Candyman, which I know you and I have briefly discussed in previous ones. And like I said, I think what we'll do when the remake comes out, I think you and I can review the old one and the new one, which I think will be fun.
Definitely.
But I think, other than Candyman, I don't think there was really anything that was entertaining in that kind of vein other than before Scream than Candyman. Were there any movies at that time, like from 90 to 95, where you were like, wow, this is a fantastic horror film? I could be missing something, but I just don't remember it being a movie that popped in the horror genre. Like to me, Candyman, even though Candyman was a cult film, it was critically, had good critical reviews. And when I saw it, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you saying that, I'm thinking Candyman, and I'm trying to think. And no, I mean, I was born in 94, so it was
okay. There you go. Sorry,
it was a big thing
right
for me. So, but obviously I go back and I love all the old horrors anyway. So, but I can't think of anything actually, because I completely fell in love with the slasher genre anyway, that came in with the 90s with Scream. I Know What You Did Last Summer and all of that. So.
All right, so then we'll get right into it then. So we're going to review the first Scream movie. So I'm going to give a little background on the movie. It was kind of fun looking to some facts on the movie. So Scream came out in 1996. It was directed by Wes Craven. So Wes Craven, of course, is a legend in the horror movie genre. He started in the late 60s, early 70s. He directed films like Last House on the Left. And of course, in the 80s, he's famous for the Nightmare on Elm Street film. And the couple of sequels that he directed, notably, and we may do this on another one, as I was looking through his filmography before we got on this recording, the New Nightmare one, which is when he revisited the character and kind of did a meta movie within the movie, having their actors play themselves, figuring out how to stop Freddy in real life. I thought that was really creative and kind of a new way to approach some material that had kind of gotten pretty stale from all the sequels, but we'll get into another show. But he did that movie. He did one of my favorite movies, horror movies, actually, and it came out in 88, which is called The Serpent and the Rainbow. It wasn't very well. I don't know if it was received well. It didn't do well. I saw it in the movies. It's about voodoo in Haiti with Bill Pullman. Excellent horror film. One of my favorites. So I would highly recommend that. Maybe you and I can talk about that one. But at the time that Scream was coming out in 96, he was kind of in a commercial kind of slump. He had still been making movies, but not since Nightmare on Elm Street had anything popped really since then for him. And he got the opportunity to direct this film that was scripted by Kevin Williamson. So if you listen to Niamh's podcast, episode 65, Kevin Williamson is a pretty prolific screenwriter and a creator of television shows like Dawson's Creek. And I think he executive produced The Vampire Diaries as well. He also wrote the horror films I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and actually another film that I've forgotten about that I had watched when it came out in 96 called Teaching Mrs. Tingle, starring Helen Mirren. He wrote that film as well. He actually wrote that film before he wrote Scream. And a funny fact I saw is that Scream was originally called Scary Movie. So if you are a fan of parody movies, you know the Scary Movie franchise, Paradise. But that was actually the original title of Kevin Williamson's screenplay, but then they changed it to Scream. And the other fun fact before we get into it was I didn't know, in the opening sequence, we'll talk about that with Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore was actually originally cast to play Sidney Prescott, Neve Campbell's role, but she suggested that she play the role at the very beginning of the movie because she felt, which I think is a good thought, that if she got killed right at the beginning, then that would set the table that anyone could be killed at any time. So I thought that was a really good decision on his part. And actually, the other one was David Arquette was actually going to be cast as Loomis, but he wanted the Dewey role instead. So I think that turned out to be well because he's great in that part as well. All right, so we'll get right into it. Let me start with the cast of Scream. So it's a pretty big cast of young actors at the time that this movie came out. So you have Drew Barrymore as Casey. You have Nev Campbell, of course, as the main character, Sidney Prescott. You have Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers, the reporter. You have Rose McGowan, David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich, Liev Schreiber in a small role that will be expanded in Scream 2 as we talk about that. So we'll go ahead and get into it. So the movie opens, of course, the famous opening of Scream, if you've seen it, is basically the typical girl at home alone watching TV. The phone rings and she picks it up and proceeds to have a series of conversations with an unknown person that's asking her questions, ask her what her favorite horror movie is. And of course, she's like, who is this? And it kind of escalates to the point where, it's the famous, oh my God, he's close to the house. He's in the house. And then obviously ends with her being murdered. And that's the opening before the credits start. So just commenting on that scene, I'll let you come in, Niamh, is, obviously it's done with a lot of suspense, kind of, and we'll see through these movies is it's kind of an homage to these movies and also kind of making fun of them at the same time. And I think this is a good setup because the movie, it's very suspenseful, legitimately. There's some gory violence at the end of the scene. And it kind of, I think it sets the table for the movie really well. What are your thoughts on that opening sequence?
I really enjoyed the opening sequence, and I enjoyed the phone calls, the now famous line, "What's your favorite scary movie?" I always really enjoyed that one. And it did really build the suspense, and what Drew Barrymore said about killing her early on, that did give you the feeling of, oh well, they've killed the most famous person in this off, so anyone can be killed, so I did really enjoy it. And at the end, obviously with her mother, you don't necessarily see too much of the gore when she's hung from the tree, to put it delicately, when she's like hung from the tree. But then you just hear the mother scream, because obviously her parents have come home as well, haven't they? And they've been hearing it over the phone before finding her. So that builds it again. And then obviously the father finds her and the mother's screaming. And it was a really good scene. I enjoyed the opening.
Yeah. And as I was doing my notes here, because the one thing I had remembered about Scream, and if you find any Easter eggs that are in there, please jump in if I miss any. When I was doing some research, I'm glad I did, that the scene. So when the parents come to the house and they see the door open and they can't, they know something's wrong, the father tells the mother to go over to the Mackenzies and call the police. So if you remember, that's the same line that Jamie Lee Curtis delivers in Halloween. Go over to the Mackenzies and call the police. Yes, I missed it too. Yes, it's the same line. So I found some Easter eggs that I took notes on, but that was one that I missed. So, obviously Scream, Kevin Williamson, the writer, was a huge horror movie fan. And it's funny, there's a Florida connection, which I'm from, and I had forgotten about these murders. He based his original treatment of this screenplay on there was murders. There's a big university here in Florida, in Gainesville, called the University of Florida.
It's Danny Rowling, isn't it? The Gainesville Ripper. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm acting like you wouldn't know about this. I'm so sorry. Of course you know about this, and you probably know more about it than I remember. But I was living in Florida, of course, at the time. Obviously very scary. So he based the plot kind of on that loosely, but that was some of his inspiration. So when I read that, I'm like, I have forgotten about the Danny Rowling case.
Yes, because I thought that as well with the opening scene about the posing in the tree, because he used to do like a lot of graphic posing with his victims. Like there was one girl, I think her head was cut off and it was left on the other side of the room, like looking at the body while her nipples were cut off and things like that. It was really like graphic sort of posing of the body. So that did make me think of it as well. I thought, yeah, it is sort of, you can see how it's loosely based with the way the gore and the bodies are treated in the film, like.
Yeah. No, and again, I'm laughing now that I would cite a case and assume that you didn't know about it. I won't make that mistake again.
I actually forgot. Yeah, I was thinking it's a Florida case. Yeah, he's from Florida, of course.
Yeah. Of course, exactly. All right, so so definitely, so that was the first Easter egg. So that was the same line that Jamie Lee Curtis used, which is fantastic. And obviously, as we go through the film itself, there's a lot of times you'll see, when these victims are home by themselves, a lot of them are watching horror movies, and there's several scenes in Halloween that are present in Scream that you see on the TV that a character may be watching or or a horror movie that they're watching, especially towards the end. But all right, so let's get into the main story. So the main story of Scream is Sidney Prescott, played by Nev Campbell. The movie is set a year after her mother was raped and murdered. So obviously her character is dealing with the trauma of that event. Obviously a year later, it's still fresh, and we're coming upon the anniversary of that crime. And then, of course, beginning with the opening scene where Casey is murdered, there's obviously a revisiting of this, and you meet Sydney and her friends, and including them like a movie geek played by Jamie Kennedy, and then Skeet Ulrich plays her boyfriend, Loomis, which is another homage, of course, to Halloween with the character's name. So another easy one there. And as again, you get to learn about her school life, kind of what she's dealing with, her relationship with her boyfriend. Obviously, one of the big subtexts of the movie is, and it's funny because they talk about how, when he's given the rules of movies, how virgins, you have to be a virgin. If you have sex, that means sex equals you're going to get killed. Obviously they're dealing with an issue in their relationship because she's still dealing with this trauma, and they've kind of lost their intimacy that they were having before that. So all kind of that plays out as the movie goes. So then as the killings start, then obviously the trauma is revisited, and the movie becomes both a horror film to me and kind of a mystery as well, which I think is what sets it apart from kind of other horror movies. Most horror movies have a straightforward narrative, killer, teenagers get killed. There's somewhat of a backstory to the killer, but in this one, there's a lot of stuff going on at the same time, and of course the humor as well. So what are your thoughts on the actual main story of Scream?
I enjoyed it, like you said, the mystery of it, and especially when you get to, when you see it for the first time, you obviously find out who the killer is and everything like that, and you watch it back, you sort of see little hints about who the actual killer is and things like that. So I did enjoy the mystery element of it, and like you said, that does set it apart as well, because it isn't just masked killer killing somebody, and there's just safe with Friday the 13th or Halloween, there's a small backstory, and then it just goes into he's attacking these random teenagers. It does sort of set it apart, and the story comes together obviously in the end then with the reveal, which is funny, and it's good because it does put everything together.
Yeah, and we're going to get it. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. So I was having that talk with myself that I always have when we do something like this regarding spoilers. So I think we're going to do the rule of, look, this movie came out 25 years ago. If you haven't seen it by now, but what we will do is when we get to the reveal, because I think that's going to be, if we don't talk about it, that's kind of an incomplete discussion of the movie. So I'll give a little spoiler warning before people can turn it off, watch the movie, fast forward, or anything like that before we get into that part of it. So I'll throw out a little warning out there, because I think we do need to discuss it, because it's a major part of I think what makes the film good. So we'll get into that a little bit later. So a couple of more homages that I wanted to talk about, and I can have you comment. I had forgotten this as well. Like I said, I've literally seen Scream only once, so this is only the second time I've seen the movie. So like I said, I remember the reveal in Scream 1. I'll talk more about Scream 2 when we get to it, but there was little things that I've forgotten that I think make me enjoy the movie more. So the first cameo that I loved was, or that I noticed, was Linda Blair with her 3-second cameo from the star from The Exorcist. Was a reporter. She literally was on for 3 seconds. So as Gail Weathers is coming out of her vehicle or going to the school, she's asking, she threw out a question. It was literally a 3-second cameo. So another horror movie legend in the film. And then my favorite one was the quote unquote Freddy Krueger cameo, which I had forgotten about as well. So Henry Winkler, who is the principal of the school, and I'll get to his performance in a minute, who's fantastic. We'll get to him in a minute. He's looking, there's some knockings on the wall. He's getting a little spooked. He goes out to the hallway, and there's a janitor named Fred who's got the full Freddy Krueger get up. And it turns out that that's Wes Craven, the director. It's so quick, I didn't realize it was him. So it's Wes Craven playing the character he created as an homage to the film that he directed before. So I thought that was cool. And then, of course, the janitor's name was Fred. So that just made me laugh. It was funny.
Yeah.
So,
I didn't know it was Wes Craven, though.
I did not either.
All that, but I did know it was actually Wes Craven that played him.
Yeah, it was great. So, and then, so Henry Winkler, and I forgot that Henry Winkler was in the movie, which is just shows you how long ago I've seen it. Like I said, and I know, he's a major actor. He paid the Fonz on Happy Days in American television. But he's in the movie until he meets his untimely demise. But he's great. I mean, he's funny. He's kind of smart assy with the kids. I just loved his performance in the movie. I just thought he
Yeah.
had a lot of fun with it. What did you think of his performance?
I enjoyed it. I was gonna say when you see the bits where the killing has started and teenagers just being teenagers are quite insensitive and they dress up as Ghostface and run around.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. The way he just he tells them off for doing it and calling them insensitive and everything like that. The way he just goes at them, I really enjoyed that.
No, it was great, and that's
Yeah,
another thing
and
about
obviously it's set up as well for his death end, isn't it? Because he had the ghost face mask there,
yeah.
so it sort of sets up for it because he's looking at the mask, looking at the mask, and of course the real ghost face is there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you
Yeah.
brought up another good point about something that's funny that on revisiting this movie that I enjoyed about Scream. I think it really did a good job. And I don't know if it's Kevin Williamson's review from when he was a teenager. So I think he's in his 30s when he wrote this. So he's, or he was a younger writer. But it does show, and I think it adds to kind of the black humor of the movie, is the dark humor, is just how just teenagers are asses,
Yeah.
it just really underscores that fact. It's just that this horrible murder, and I know part of it too is coping mechanisms. I know when horrible things happen, people make bad jokes and there's gallows
Yeah.
humor, and I kind of get that psychology of it, but it's just within the teenage realm. It's not really gallows humor. It's like it's intended to be cruel, and it's
Yeah.
intended to kind of and what you notice in Scream, and then we'll talk about more in Scream 2. It's, I think, more so in Scream 2, but it shows you kind of that the way kind of high school works, in the sense that there's the cool kids, the nerdy kids. There's always all these cliques of different kids, and when something horrible happens, it always seems like there's an opportunity to kind of jump on any
Yeah.
person that may seem weaker than you or victimized or anything like that. So I thought it, and I didn't think it was blatant. I don't think it was trying to send a message. I think it was just a realistic portrayal of how certain teenagers would act if the situation happened
Yeah.
in real life. I think it's pretty spot on when it portrays that.
Especially the scene as well when Sydney runs into the toilet upset, obviously after the ghost face has run down the corridor, and you hear the girls talking about her outside. It's that classic scene, she's in the cubicle and they don't know she's there, and the awful things to say about her and her mother. It shows, like you said, how teenagers would probably react. It's a picking, nasty sort of teenage girl sort of picking, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I know that's a great
Yeah.
point, and that's the scene I think that typifies it as well. And I think uh,
Mm.
the other thing about Nev Campbell's character, or about Sidney Prescott, which I think gives it some depth too, I think as the movie progresses and she kind of finds out more about the circumstances surrounding her mother's death. So obviously, we can get into that a little bit. So as we come to find out as the movie progresses, is that we find out, of course, that her mother was raped and murdered, and that someone was actually
Mm.
prosecuted and jailed for that murder. And as the movie progresses, there seems to be some seeds of doubt, because Gail Weathers is advocating for this person that was wrongly convicted, and then it forces Sidney Prescott to kind of reevaluate who her mother was, and obviously that makes her even more conflicted, because obviously she's suffering the trauma of losing her mother, but
Mm.
not being sure if the person that actually killed her is the person that's in jail. So Lee Schreiber plays that character. Now he'll become more important in Scream 2 when we get into that, but
Mm.
Cotton Weary is his name. So I thought that added some depth to there. As far as performances in the movie, I'll let you take the lead there. Why don't you give me some of your, we have a large cast. There's a main cast and all the supporting people. Who are some of your favorite performances in this movie?
Um, Obviously, I'm a huge Drew Barrymore fan anyway. I loved Santa Clarita Diet, like her recent work and everything. So I'm a huge fan of her anyway. So I did love her performance, like at the start, that sort of set the tone for the film. Um, Obviously, David Arquette and Courtney Cox in it. I think because their characters work together a lot. More so, I think, in the second one, but in the first as well, you see a lot of scenes with them together. I think it was obviously the actors in real life. I think that was where they met, wasn't it, on the set of Scream? And obviously, they
Yes.
obviously went on to marry and have a child. I think they're divorced now, but I think you could see the chemistry between them on between the two characters as well as the actors, and I did really enjoy those two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think the main cast I think is good. I think Nev Campbell does
Mm.
a good job. She brings a good. I watched her on Party of Five, which was a television show she was on, and that's how Wes Craven actually found her. And that was another funny fact too, because I don't know. I'm sure you saw the movie The Craft with her in it, right? And Fairuza
Oh
Balk. Have
yeah,
you seen that movie? Yeah.
yeah, I love
So
that
that came out the
movie.
year before Scream. Right. That came out the year before, and actually Nev Campbell almost actually I think turned down Scream at first because she didn't want to do back to back horror movies and be
Mm.
known for that. So, but she ended up ultimately taking the role, and I think she's a good lead in that movie. I think she kind of grounds the movie. Her performance, I think, is very low key in a good way. I think when she needs to be aggressive, she is. When she needs to be vulnerable, she is. I think her lead performance in the movie, I think, is really strong. But yeah, David Arquette, and Courtney Cox are great. David Arquette is pretty good at playing the dim-witted kind of nice guy,
Yeah.
so he's great. And then Courtney Cox, I think, gets to play an obnoxious reporter, and she does a great job there as well. I will single out Matthew Lillard.
Oh
That
yeah, yeah. I
he's
like him.
he's fantastic, and it's funny because he's been known for. I mean, after Scream, he did. He was Shaggy in the Scooby Doo movies and did a
Mm.
dead-on Shaggy impression. Whether you like the movies or not, his
Brilliant.
his yeah, he's fantastic as Shaggy. But in the last couple of years, it's funny because I hadn't seemed to seen him in a while, but he's done a lot of dramatic acting in the last few years on TV shows that I've watched, and he's a great actor. He's phenomenal, and he's great in this movie. And the reason why he's great is because normally, when a good actor does an over the top performance, it's good when it's a good actor. Like there's over the top performances where you're like, oh my god, I can't stand this guy. And that character in Scream could have been easily the guy that you're like, God, this movie could have done without him. He's too over the top. It's too much, but
Mm.
he plays it in such a way that it's funny. And I know it's supposed to be over the top. And because he does such a good job at it, I mean, and we'll get to the end of the movie in the climax because he's got some of the funniest lines at the end. And
Yes.
from what I read too, a lot of those lines that were there were ad-libbed. They were not in the script. So that's just him just being a good actor. So we'll get to that in a minute. But his was one of my favorite performances of the movie. Now I want to get into, and this is because this is where your area of expertise in. So I want to talk about kills in Scream.
Hmm.
I want you to tell me what are your favorite kills in this movie because I know you got to have some.
I think it's one that was parodied in Scary Movie as well because they, like we mentioned, Scary Movie. They parody. I know what you did last summer and Scream a lot in the first one. It's one of the ones. She goes out to the guy. I can't remember the character's name. I think she's Sydney's friend.
Rose McGowan, Adam C. I think is it the blonde?
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Yeah. I forgot her character's name, but yeah, the actress is Rose McGowan.
Yeah. She goes out. It's at the party, and she goes out to the garage, obviously, to get more beer, and confronts Ghostface, and tries to escape through the little. I think it's like a doggy door
Yeah,
or
it's a
something that's
kid. It's a
in the
doggy door. Yeah,
garage.
yes,
And she gets obviously caught in the door. In Scary Movie, it's obviously made a lot more comedic and silly, but it was just as silly and funny in this as well. So that's
yeah.
probably one of my favorites.
No, that's a good one because that's the thing too. It's so funny because it's like, and that's why I think these movies are good too because it strikes that balance. I mean, before it gets to the
Yeah.
doggy door part, it's pretty terrifying. Obviously she's trapped, she's trying to get out, and you think it's great because it's set up great because it's like she's smart, she's gonna get through the door. She found a way out. Oh, and then it goes over to the to the, and you find yourself laughing and going, oh my god, I'm laughing at this poor girl,
Yeah.
being killed. And but yeah, it's definitely funny. And I haven't seen the I've seen the first Scary Movie. I haven't seen any of the other ones. If they parodied it in that, I don't remember because I think I saw Scary Movie once. It's the same way when it came out, so I probably don't remember most of the jokes in it. But yeah, it definitely, that's a good one. That's a very good one. I mean, I do like like I said, the opening sequence is very good.
Mm, yeah.
With Drew Barrymore because I think it sets the table for what's to come. But yeah, no, that one with Rose McGowan is pretty funny. So let's get to the mystery. So let's go back to the mystery. So obviously we
Mm.
have the various people getting killed, and then we get to the reveal. So if you're listening to this now, you have not seen Scream, probably turn this off for about 5 minutes or so, as long as we take or watch the movie and come back. But let's get into it. So we have a party at the end of Scream, and things kind of escalate to there. And you have the group of kids watching Halloween, and looking at that, talking about Jamie Lee Curtis, and and then we get to where the killers reveal themselves. So in Scream, there's been speculation throughout the movie, especially from Jamie Kennedy's character, the movie store nerd, who talks about, one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he talks about how horror movies work, and he gives all the rules, got to be a virgin. If you have sex, sex equals death, drugs equals death, which is a great scene because he's giving his sermon to the crowd of teenagers at the party, and they're all sitting there going, well, you can't have sex. And they, of course, are all like, what? No, that's ridiculous. And no drugs. And they're like, no drugs, what? And they're all like, this is terrible. So, which was very funny. And obviously he went through the whole list of suspects. And of course, one of the rules is anybody can be a suspect. And I think Scream does a good job of kind of listing out who possibly could have done it. So in Scream, it turns out that there's actually not one killer, but two. And it turns out to be Billy Loomis, Sidney Prescott's boyfriend, and Matthew Lillard's character, Stewart, who's more of an accomplice. So let's get into that, because I think it's well done, because I think what I liked about Scream was he was initially kind of framed as a suspect, because if you remember the scene when Ghostface first comes into Sydney's, attacks Sydney, and then her boyfriend jumps in the window the second time, and then the cell phone comes out. So she's already suspicious of him early on, but I think the movie does a good job of kind of putting him under suspicion early, but then kind of taking it away, only to bring it back. So I don't know if you agree with that or not, or did you kind of know who the killers were? Was it pegged for you at some point in the movie, or did they do a good job of misdirection?
Initially, when I first ever watched it, I couldn't have predicted it. But looking at it, like I said, looking at it back, you see the hints, like the cell phone falling out when Ghostface has attacked Sydney. And there was also like a little one right at the start, just after Casey's murder, that I actually noticed the other day. Like you said, you notice things again, especially rewatching it after all these years. And when they sat around the fountain at school talking about Casey's death, you could see Sydney's uncomfortable and everything like that. And they turn around to Stu and they say, oh, well, didn't you date Casey for a while? Didn't she dump you? And it's showing that connection straight away. So that was a little bit of sort of a hint to who was the killer.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And now that you're talking about it, the other thing that I'm literally thinking about it right now, which I think kind of gives you a hint, and it's subtle, is that in the conversations that Sydney and Billy had, a lot of them revolved around his insensitivity to her situation.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's subtle in a way, because especially that one conversation that they have when he basically tells her, you need to get over it.
Yeah, after a year.
Yeah.
Oh, that's infuriating.
Yes. And it's funny too. And now that I'm thinking about it literally right now, that's a huge red flag to me that he might have been, but I wasn't even thinking about red flag. It was more, but again, when it wraps it up in the fact that teenagers, I really passed it off as, which I think is a credit to the movie, as just him being insensitive. And I actually gave his character the benefit of the doubt, because I'm thinking, you know what? It's been a year. He's just wanting to have a relationship with his girlfriend. I don't think he really meant to be insensitive about, he just said it wrong. And then he apologizes immediately in the scene, but it wasn't the first, because he was kind of, distant about it. He was never really, now that I look at it back, but watching the movie the first time, you don't catch it. But like I said, I think those are huge red flags, that he doesn't have a connection to Sydney's mother because he was involved. So I think that was a huge clue that I missed, that I think was thrown throughout the movie. So for me, I think it was pretty successful, even though he was initially kind of the first quote unquote suspect. I think the movie did a good job in misdirecting back to him actually being the killer. So I thought that did a good job with that. And then Stewart is kind of along for the ride. So again, Matthew Lillard, who's fantastic. So what I wanted to talk about was a couple of lines that he threw out at the very climax of the film. So of course, after the reveal, there's the violent confrontation, with Sydney and Billy and Stewart. And then of course, part of their plan to frame other people is to stab each other so that they appear to be victims and not perpetrators. And of course, that's a darkly comic scene as well, because of course, Billy stabs Stewart first, and then Stewart stabs Billy, and then Stewart seems to be more hurt than they originally intended. And he just throws away some lines, or what my favorite line is when he gets hit with the phone by by Sydney, and his reaction is like, you hit me with a phone, what are you doing? It was just very funny. And then the other line was, it gets funnier because when he's mortally injured and he just gets woozier and more out of it, and it's just, he's like, yeah, I think you stabbed me too. Like, it was just some of the greatest lines on there, and he was just funny. It was just funny. And he was talking about, I think what was it, the line he said something about how his mom and dad are going to be really mad at him when they find out what he did.
Yeah.
It was a throwaway line that was just made me laugh. And I think that's the thing. And I think it underscores, like I said, the undercurrent of very dark humor, but very funny. And I think it helps too, because I think this is what kind of elevates this movie over the typical teen slasher movie. I think that's why it's been considered kind of a classic. But what did you think of the climax? So after the reveal and the confrontation and the violence and all of that together, what did you think of that part of the movie, the end?
I really enjoyed it. Like you said, it was funny, and everything's just wrapped up. I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And the backstory of Billy. So
yeah.
That's the other thing I read too, in the research for this. So when Kevin Williamson was writing the screenplay, there was a kind of a debate between him and the studio, and actually they were all, I think, in it together. They weren't sure if they were going to have the killer have a motive. So I think that the two thoughts of trains of thought were, one, do we have the killer have no motive, kind of via like Halloween, because that would make it scarier. Because as we were talking about earlier with serial killers, which I think makes things scarier in movies like that, when there's really no motive, I think it kind of makes it more frightening on a certain level, because we always want to assign a motive to something. I think that gives us psychologically at least a place where we can go, oh, I see why somebody did that. But when there's absolutely no reason for it, I think it's more terrifying. And then the other train of thought was, to have more closure, we should have the killer have a distinct motive as to why they was doing the killing. So in this movie, by the decision to have two people involved, he actually got to do both. So Billy, of course, had a motive of abandonment of his mother because of Sydney's mother having an affair with Billy's dad.
Yeah.
And so that's his motive that he articulates in that scene at the end of the movie. And then you have Stewart, who has no motive. And which leads to another one of the funny lines, because I forgot which character. I don't know, but Sydney asked him. So they asked him, why were you doing this? And his response was peer pressure, which is a fantastic, funny, which was, I guess, another ad-lib line. I don't think that was in the script either. And Wes Craven smartly said, okay, that's hilarious, we're going to keep that in. But yeah, so he had literally no motive other than just because. So he got to get both of them in, which is great, because I think it, like I said, just it enhanced. You have the serious dark motive and the psychotic. They're both psychotic, obviously, but then you have the funny, ridiculous kind of clown dude that's just along for the ride, even though horrific results happen. So I thought that was a great way to kind of get both things in there. So I love that part of it too. And like I said, Matthew Lillard's performance is probably one of my favorites in Scream. And again, at the end, especially at the end, so he gets to shine kind of as he's revealed to be one of the killers, and kind of do it full blast. So that's my thoughts on Scream. Anything you want to add on the movie before I give my review or my rating?
No, I've got nothing to add. I don't think. I think we said it all.
Yeah, I think we covered it. I think so. All right. So on the first Scream, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. 5, I really reserve for all. And horror, like I said, for me, horror is a genre that I kind of revisit. I pop in and out. But 4 for me, for a horror movie is strong. That's a strong review for me, and I think it's a strong movie. And I think I actually, because when I first saw the movies way back when, I was a lot younger, obviously, I liked them, but I don't think I didn't love them like people loved them at the time that they were released. So obviously you were really little, so you saw them later, but at the time they were acclaimed and it made a whole bunch of money, and obviously the sequels that were spawned. I thought it was good, but on the revisit, watching it now that I'm older, I think I appreciate the movie actually not more now, and I think I like it better now than I did then, which is unusual for a movie for me. So I think I would have given it probably maybe 3 stars 20 years ago, but now it's a strong 4. I think it's a pretty well done, pretty fantastic movie that kind of plays with the genre, makes fun of it, but is kind of reverent at the same time. So that's my rating on it, 4 out of 5. What would you rate Scream?
I think for me the same. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. It's the franchise as a whole has always been a favorite for me, and yeah, it's just a 4 for me. I absolutely love it. I've I absolutely love it. I've got no more to add. I've enjoyed it just as much now as I did all those years ago and everything. So yeah.
All right. So then we will move on from Scream on to Scream 2. So Scream 2 came out actually, and I didn't realize it came out a year later.
Mm.
So obviously, as movie studios do, the first Scream cleared over $100 million in domestic box office. I don't know what it did worldwide, and look it up. So of course, that's the ticket to a sequel. And the other thing I read too, apparently when Kevin Williamson was trying to sell the screenplay, he actually wrote Scream, and then he actually wrote The Treatment, which is a small 5 or 6 page sample of Scream 2 and Scream 3, because he was trying to pitch this movie for a while and was not getting success. And he figured, you know what, if I write treatments for a couple more stories, maybe I could sell this as a franchise. That was his thought process, and it turned out he ended up being correct. And one thing before we get into Scream 2, the other fact that I thought was interesting too, I was talking about earlier, that Wes Craven was kind of in a commercial slump in the sense that the movies he was making weren't successful, like Nightmare on Elm Street. He was kind of known as the Nightmare on Elm Street guy, even though he had been around since the 70s. He almost didn't do Scream, actually. He was offered it and he turned it down. And there was a story, and I don't know how true or not it is. Sometimes you got to watch the internet, but there was a apparently a story where a young kid came up to him, met him somewhere, and said that he had gone soft, that he used to make horrifying, violent, gory movies that scare the crap out of people, and that he had gone soft. And I guess he took that criticism to heart and then changed his mind, because he wasn't going to do Scream because he thought it was too violent, which I thought was an interesting position for him to take, of all people. Now, I haven't seen The Last House on the Left, and to be frankly, the only reason I haven't seen it is because the subject, I guess the subject matter makes me uncomfortable, because I know if I believe a girl is like brutally raped.
Yeah, it's very graphic.
Yeah, and then and I know it's a revenge movie, and I know that they come to the house where she's at, or it ends up somewhere, and then she ends up exacting revenge. It's just, and I know it's a 70s grungy kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and just for some reason, for me, it's just I don't know, it doesn't. It bothers me on a level that I don't think it would be entertaining, and I don't think I'd be able to appreciate it on a film level, because it may be a fantastic movie. I'm not even saying it's bad. It's just something that I'm not entertained by that, unfortunately. And it's not a judgment. It's just my own personal thing. It's kind of like after I had kids, things about kids bother me more than they did before I had kids and I was single. It's kind of that kind of situation. So, but again, which I thought was interesting, but I think as he got older, I think he wanted to make different films, because I had forgotten that he had directed a movie with Meryl Streep in it about a teacher that's trying to teach young kids how to play the violin. So obviously not a horror film at all, that he directed in 1999. I had forgotten he had done that. So I think he was trying to do other things. So I think revisiting that genre, I think he was just not in the, but then when somebody challenged him about it, he's like, wait a minute, yeah, I am kind of the horror guy. And then he went back to it. So just an interesting aside there. But let's get into Scream 2. So we've got this kind of we have the same creative team back. So Kevin Williamson, of course, wrote the screenplay for this movie as well. This movie came out a year later, 1997. Wes Craven, of course, also came back to direct. So you have, again, another large cast of young actors, led by the core cast of Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox and David Arquette. And in this film, you have Jada Pinkett Smith, Omar Epps, Heather Graham, Elise Neal. Liev Schreiber comes back as Cotton. So obviously Cotton's got a bigger role in this movie, and we'll get into that as we go into the movie as well. So Scream 2 opens with kind of the same setup as the first Scream. So obviously this time you have Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps as a couple going to see a screening of the film Stab, which is based on the book that Gail Weathers wrote, which chronicles the events of the first Scream. So obviously we get the movie within a movie kind of thing that continues through the franchise. So obviously this sets it up. They talk about, as they're waiting in line, they're talking about how Jada Pinkett Smith rails against how the African-American community is not presented at all in horror films. That perspective is never presented. So there's a funny scene at the beginning where they're getting their tickets, and Omar's kind of giving her a hard time. He's like, look, I just want to see a scary movie. Can we knock it off? And they go inside. Of course, they have everybody's dressed up as Ghostface, with their glow in the dark neon knives. They're stabbing each other, you know, as the movie starts to play. And then, of course, the scene culminates. Jada Pinkett leaves because she wants to get some popcorn. She really doesn't like scary movies, so she's kind of spooked by it. Her boyfriend ends up going to the bathroom, and then, of course, he is subsequently murdered for real. And then after he's murdered in the bathroom, Ghostface sits next to Jada Pinkett Smith, and she thinks it's him. She realizes it's not when there's blood all over her hands, and then that killing ensues in the chaos of everybody going crazy in the theater regarding, reenacting the scenes from Stab, and then go to the credits. So kind of the same setup. So what do you think? Let's do this. Why don't we compare? I'll let you do it. How do you compare this opening to the opening of the first movie?
I think I preferred the first movie's one because I think that was, you hadn't really seen anything like that at the time because it was quite shocking. But the second one, it was good. I was going to say the part I really liked about it is because obviously this film, you can see the cinema is packed. It is, they're dressed up. It's implied in the film, this is highly anticipated. This film, the Stab movie, is highly anticipated. So it's quite crowded and everything. And as obviously she's been stabbed and she's trying to scream for help, they think it's some sort of, thing to promote the movie. And nobody believes it's real, so nobody goes to help her. I was going to say I really liked that part because that sort of makes it really tense and actually made it more scary because it's like, well, no, she does really need help. And you're sitting there watching it's quite frustrating to see because they all think it is like a thing to promote the movie, like some sort of publicity stunt to thing the movie.
No, that's a great point. And it's funny too. Yeah, you know what? That part of it, that last part you just said, I didn't even think about it that way. I was looking at it more just people not even just paying attention because they were just busy watching the screen. But you're right. It makes that killing make more sense where you wouldn't go, wait a minute, why wouldn't anybody stop it? That's a great point because everybody's stabbing each other. It's a big publicity stunt. They were giving out all the costumes. It's just people reenacting a murder. So yeah, that's a great point. So I think that heightens the tension. And as an audience member, you're going, oh my God, this is happening and nobody's doing anything about it. And literally, she has to go up onto the screen and fall down before people stop, and take off their masks. At the very end of that scene, before the credits come on, you see everybody going, oh, wait a minute. Something's going on. Something's wrong. So yeah, you're right. So up until that point, it's great. And I agree with you. I do think the sequence in the first movie is, I probably like it more, but I think you said for the main reasons, and this movie kind of makes fun of it too, which is why I think these movies are strong. It's tough to recreate the surprise of the first film of any kind of thing. So obviously, and they talk about it here. They talk about that's a running gag in this movie. The first movie was kind of, the rules of horror movies and making fun of it. The theme in this movie, and we'll talk more about it more, is the validation of sequels. So because there's one of my favorite scenes we'll get into in a minute with that, but. Same thing. So I think, when you do it a second time, it's never going to be as good as the first time. But I still think it was like you said, I think there was moments of tension in there and it was creative in its own way. And obviously there's a comfort level there because that's how the first movie was set up. So you're going to do the second movie kind of the same way, just to get you right back into the familiarity of what made the first movie successful. So, but I agree. I think the first one is better because of the surprise element to it. And you hadn't seen it before. All right. So after that opening credit scene, so obviously that sets the stage for the second film, and we're away from Woodboro now. So Sidney Prescott is in college in Ohio, and actually Jamie Kennedy joins her from the first movie. So the movie video store nerd is in college with her. So she's kind of moved on with her life in the sense that she started college. She's a theater major. She has a best friend played by Elise Neal, and she's dating a fraternity brother played by actor Jerry O'Connell. So that's kind of the setup of this movie. And then, of course, as we would know what happens, the bodies start piling up, and Sidney is now confronted again with the horror. At the beginning of the movie, I thought was funny too with the caller ID. It's funny to see the stuff that goes back. I mean, even the first Scream too. It's just like it's so funny. I can't even imagine a world without DVDs and stuff like that. So they're talking about the VCRs and the video stores and So for me, that's crazy because it's a whole different world. Even though it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was kind of funny. But in this one, so obviously she's revisiting this trauma, and people are prank calling her when the movie opened, and she's kind of more. I think she's more empowered in this movie than she was in the first movie. I think because one more time has gone by. Two, she's kind of confronted her trauma and defeated it in the first movie. So I think when things are remind her of things early on, at least she's more able to kind of handle it. But as you see this movie progress, obviously it's obviously still there, and then the things revisit. Because I think that the other theme here is revisiting trauma, which is always terrible for anybody if you've had a trauma in your life and you try to move on and you revisited it because it repeats. Obviously that causes great distress. So I think this movie kind of runs on that theme as well, because if she's trying to move on with her life and she's kind of stuck but wants to move on, I think that was kind of the theme, and her performance in here kind of reflects that. So what are your thoughts on the beginning or the early part of this movie and where her character is after the events of the first movie?
Yeah, like you said, I enjoy this. Seems like a moving on, and you were saying about the revisiting the trauma thing. I really enjoyed the way they showed that, especially obviously because of the events of the first one. It turned out to be Sydney's boyfriend and everything. You see her, she's overly cautious with the new boyfriend, and he is like pretty understanding about it. And obviously that's revealed like later on and everything, but you can see she doesn't fully trust him because of Loomis in the first film.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's reflected there. I think, like you said, I think that's the thing. I think she's stuck between the desire to move on,
Yeah.
but the obstacles are there, like you said, because of obviously her first boyfriend tried to murder her. So obviously that's gonna leave her with some issues with any kind of boyfriend going forward. So I want to get into the another main part of the story. So as I stated, Leaf Schreiber plays Cotton Weary, who was wrongly convicted of Sydney's mother's murder in the first Scream. So obviously in this movie, he's been released and is looking to obviously restart his life and sees this as an opportunity to cash in, and he thinks he deserves that, right? So that's kind of a theme with him. And Leaf Schreiber, great actor. He does a good job here, and like I said, his role is expanded in this movie as well. And I think I liked his performance a lot, because I liked where they took that character, because I think to me it's a kind of a natural progression. He's kind of, a scumbag about it, but at the same time, you got to go, well, wait a minute. I mean, he was wrongly convicted, and he didn't do that much time in jail, but a day in jail for an innocent person is one day too many. I agree with that. But I think obviously he's taking this, and this is another, I think it kind of comments on kind of tabloid television as well. So he sees this as an opportunity to, one, clear his name, and if by clearing his name, he can make some cash. Hey, that's not bad either. What do you think about that part of the story?
Yeah, like you said, it is one of those, it's a dilemma, because he was wrongfully convicted and everything. You can see why he wants to cash in, but it's especially as well because he works with Gail to do it as well, doesn't he? And when she stages the confrontation between him and Sydney I think it's for a show or something, isn't it? Or like some sort of follow-up segment about a book or something like that. And she stages the confrontation between them. And it's just a bit like he's obviously going along with it because he's trying to cash in, and Sydney's uncomfortable and everything like that. So it is one of those you sort of you feel conflicted on it, don't you?
Yeah, and it makes you more conflicted, because actually Cotton's reaction to finding out that Sydney didn't know about the interview, he was upset. So
Yeah.
they made it clear that he wasn't in on ambushing her. It was clear that Gail lied to him and told him that, oh, she's in. We're going to do it now. We're going to do the interview. She's all in. Because he confronts Gail about that way. He goes, wait, she didn't know?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? So, and that brings me to one of my other favorite things about Scream 2, Gail Weathers' character. So in a normal movie, so after the events of Scream 1, you would think, and this is what normally happens in movies. So when they come back for the sequel, her character, you think, would have been fundamentally changed. So like she was kind of a tabloid reporter, confronted the horror, had to kill someone, rightfully so. So you would think she would come back in this movie maybe a little bit softer. Like, I understand the implications of the things that I've done. I'm still a reporter, but I'm doing it from a different angle. Absolutely not. She's the same person in Scream 2, and I actually love that, because I think that's actually realistic. Like, I love the fact that she's like, yeah, it kind of sucked what happened, and I had to kill people. But hey, I got a book out of it. I'm still here. The characters are still here. She just keeps it moving, which I absolutely love, because I think in a lot of other sequels she would have become more I mean, not more like Sydney, but she would have been like more of Sydney's ally, in the sense that she would have been like,
Yeah.
wow, I'm with you now, girl. I see what happened. She's the same person, which I actually loved. I love that she was still ambitious, still kind of I'm gonna play in the gray areas. Like, she didn't change at all from the first movie, which I actually
No.
liked.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the character anyway. She's again a little bit of like a comedic element to the film, is Gail's character, because she's so pushy, and you just think, oh my god, when she's saying something like, well, you know, when she ambushes Sydney or she's chasing a story. I really enjoyed the character.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's get to the other main character, of course, which is Dewey, because obviously after the initial killing happens, he comes back into town, to see if Sydney's okay. He's kind of in this movie her protector, and I like the evolution of his character too. And I do, and a small thing too, and I do like the fact that he comes back, and he's severely injured. So in the sense, obviously he's got some issues with walking, and his hands got an issue. They didn't just gloss over the fact that he was stabbed in the spine in the first movie, and then he comes back in this movie, because in a lot of other movies he would have just been like, hey, I'm good. I'm healed. Everything's fine. So it's another element to his character, and I think he's the thing that I liked about his character too is the opposite of kind of Courtney Cox. His character kind of matures a little bit between the first movie and the second movie. It's just seemed his performance is a little bit different. Like it's he's not playing the dim-witted guy anymore. Really, it's more, not that he's super intelligent, but I think he plays it as a guy that's been through a trauma as well, and is only there to protect her, and that's where his focus lies. So I think I like the change, because I think his performance changed in a good way as well. So I was a big fan of his performance in that movie as well.
And you saying there him being obviously the opposite of of Gail's character as well. I think that's what makes them that's what gives them such good chemistry as well. Is that classic, the sort of the two opposite characters ending up working together and having it work. I think that's what makes those two characters so good, is he sort of gives her a softer side. You see the softer side of her through him.
Absolutely. That's a great point. He's the one that brings out whatever humanity or goodness that you see. You're absolutely right. And I think that dynamic works really well in these movies. And I want to give one small performance kind of a shout out as well. And I'll let you add whoever you think your favorite performances are. Dwayne Martin as her cameraman. Now, his part is not that big, but this is why I love when good actors have parts. He makes every part of his performance just funny. He's almost like the audience surrogate to me, because he's basically, when he's finding out, every line he has talking about when he's read her book and he's like, why am I here? I'm not looking to build. Every time he came on screen and said a line, I think I laughed out loud, because he was just really like, this is ridiculous. And unfortunately he doesn't make it to the end of the movie. Like, they joke about how black people don't fare well in horror movies, which is funny too. But every minute he was on, it just made me laugh. Like, it was great, because it was a realistic, like, wait a minute, I'm in the middle of, no, I just want to, no. And it's just, I don't know. I loved it. So, and like I said, it's a small performance, but it just stood out to me. I noted it because it was so funny. Who were your kind of favorite performances in Scream 2 that kind of stood out for you?
I think for this one, it would be, I still can't remember the guy's name, the video nerd from the first one, the video store nerd from the first one.
Jamie Kennedy. Yep.
That's it.
Jamie Kennedy.
Because he's obviously in the second one. And I think he stood out. It just the talking about the sequels, because they make the connections obviously with the victims. I think it's Gail, him, and David Arquette that make the connections, because they said, I think the first victim she was Cece something, the sorority sister, but they find out the nickname Cece is for Casey, as in Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore's character in the first one. And I think I just liked that part. I think I just liked what he was doing in this one better than the first one, talking about the sequels, giving, the rules and everything like that.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing me back, because I was almost going to skip that, and I talked about it earlier. So one of the themes running through Scream 2, you're absolutely right. And where Scream the first Scream made fun of kind of horror movies. The second movie kind of commented on sequels. So one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which probably is not me being the film geek that I am, is the scene early in the film when they're in the film history class. So they're discussing, like I said, there's no horror involved. They're discussing sequels. And
Yes.
your character, Jamie Kennedy, is discussing how all sequels suck. And then no sequels are better than the first movie. And it's funny, the film geek in me is loving this conversation because this is a conversation I would have for hours with other film geeks. But it was fantastic when they were talking about the second movies of stuff. So it was like, they would talk about, they were saying how Aliens was better than Alien, or T2 better than Terminator. And then Sarah Michelle Gellar makes the joke, oh, you have a hard on for James Cameron, which made me laugh. And they were talking about how, everything is retread and it's not as original. And there's always that debate about sequels. And at the very end of the scene, Timothy Olyphant, great actor who's in it, I forgot his character in the movie, but he comments at the very end of the scene, which I loved as a film geek. He's like, oh, I got one. The Godfather Part 2. And then everybody in the class goes, oh, yeah, right. That's a good one. That's a good one. So it was just those little things. Those are the little moments that I kind of like. Like I said, no horror in it, no anything like that. And then when I love about it later, Timothy Olyphant's character, there's a callback to sequels at the party. He's talking to Jamie Kennedy's character, and he stops him. It has nothing to do with anything. And this is a great thing about the movie as well. He taps him on the shoulder and goes, Empire Strikes Back. Better effects, better story. So then Jamie Kennedy's response is even better. He goes, that's not a sequel. That's part of a trilogy. So that doesn't count. So I'm like, oh my God, talk about film geek. Like that's deep film geek kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where people are like, who cares? But it just made me laugh because like I said, Empire Strikes Back is universally praised as the best Star Wars film of the original trilogy, which I agree. But it was great to see that theme. Like you said, that was that running theme of sequels and how they're not, and then the sequel rules, to your point. Because what did he say? More kills, bloodier kills, higher body count, like all the stuff that you got to do to keep the audience engaged. Kind of like what we talked about with the first scene where you have the pre-credits murder, just because that's kind of now you've set up the brand now of Scream. So now if you don't see a pre-credits murder in a Scream movie, you're like, well, wait a minute, this is not really a Scream movie. Yeah. So they kind of set up their branding in there. So yeah, I agree with you that that was fantastic. So let's get to the reveal of this movie. So we get to the climax of the film. What happens is there's more kill. Well, actually, but let me back up. Let's be consistent. What was your favorite kill in Scream 2?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Trying to think of that one actually. I did obviously really enjoy the opening, like I said, with the tension and everything. I think the one as well, I think probably because it was just quite sad, is how she distrusted, Sydney distrusts her boyfriend, and she finds him dead. I think it's she finds him like tied to the cross and everything. She thought he was the killer, and I think that even the killer torments her then, doesn't she, saying, well, you thought it was him and everything like that. So I think that's probably my favorite one from this film.
Oh, that's a good choice. I'm going to pick a different one. I agree with you. I'm picking one, and it's funny because I think I'm picking this one because it stood out when I watched the film, and more suspenseful than horror, because actually the scene when Ghostface commandeers the vehicle that Sydney and her friend are in with the undercover police or the detectives, takes over the car, kills the cops, and they're driving and they're trying to get out and they crash. The scene, so Ghostface is unconscious in the front driver's side seat. They're stuck in the back, and of course, it's got the steel netting for because it's a cop car. So Sydney has to go to the front over Ghostface to get out of the vehicle. I thought that scene was played beautifully with suspense. So she gets out and she's trying to let her girlfriend out, and the door is locked, can't get it open, and she's telling her, you have to go through the front too to get out. And I thought that was well done. And it obviously ended with her friend getting murdered after they get out of the car, which I thought was a good twist, because she wants to go back and confront him because she wants to see who it is. So she's like, I want to go see who it is. And her friend, and this is what kind of makes the scene kind of more tragic too, because she's like, forget it. Let's get out of here. What are you doing? And she's like, no, if I don't confront him now, he's just going to get away, and then I'm just going to have to continue. I want to deal with this. So she wants to make a decision because she wants to move on, and then that decision has tragic consequences, which is a theme of her life. She goes back, of course, he's gone, and then we kind of knew what was going to happen. And unfortunately, her friend gets murdered. I actually love that scene because I love the tension and suspense in that scene. There was no goriness or killing till the very end of the scene, but it's just the way it was played out. Because I honestly didn't, like I said, I saw the movie a long time ago, so I didn't remember that scene and how it played out. So it was like I was watching it for the first time anyway. So I don't remember, like, does he attack Sydney? Does he attack the friend? And nothing happens, and you think they're going to be okay, and then they're not okay. So that's probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie. It stood out to me. All right, so let's get to the reveal. So this reveal I thought was really actually excellent, because unlike the first movie, I remembered one of the characters involved, but not the second character. So it was kind of a half surprise, which is kind of cool. So we didn't mention in the cast, and I neglected to do it earlier, but Laurie Metcalf plays a reporter in this film. So if you know Laurie Metcalf, great actress from Roseanne and other various films that she's done, great actress in everything she does. So she's kind of a reporter that hounds Gail's character throughout the movie. It's kind of annoying, asking annoying questions. So she's almost a throwaway character. But in the reveal, it turns out she's not a throwaway character. So we find out that Timothy Oliphant's character, and let me pull his name up because obviously he's a major part, Mickey. So Mickey, who is one of the students, he's a student that talks about Empire Strikes Back and brought up Godfather 2. So he's one of the friends in the movie as well. So it turns out that he is the killer in this movie. So you're like, oh, why is he the killer? Well, what's the deal? So then the reveal is that he was actually working with Laurie Metcalf's character, the reporter. And it turns out that she is Billy Loomis's mother.
Yeah.
So this becomes her revenge for, of course, Sidney Prescott killing her son. And of course, she's, as a great mother always does, ignores the fact that her son is psychotic. So
yeah,
great. And like you said, to kind of plays into the scene that you described as your favorite with Sidney's boyfriend being hung up on the thing. So obviously, to set that up real quick. So obviously in the movie, he gave Sidney his Greek letters, which is apparently a no-no. I don't do fraternities. Apparently that's a no-no. So they put him up, kind of, put beer down his pants, kind of do all this stupid college stuff that they do. And they left him kind of hanging there. So when the scene happens, he's still alive. And then Mickey reveals himself. So he's got to go face him. He reveals himself as the killer. And there's a great exchange, to add to your point of the scene. There's a great exchange that really brings out her trust issue. So obviously Mickey is telling Sidney, don't cut him down. She's like, cut me down, get me out of here. And he's like, you sure you want to do that? He was the one that was helping me. So there's a great exchange there. Again, funny and scary at the same time, because he's like, my favorite line of his is like, oh, killer boyfriend, which is it? We don't know, right? And he's just kind of making fun of her and saying, what are you going to do? What's it going to be? And of course, ultimately, he ends up murdering him, shooting him, and then the real second killer is revealed, which of course is turns out to be Billy Loomis's mom. And I did like that reveal, because the thing that you always concerned about a sequel, which I think they talk about as well, is what would have been bad is if the reveal would have been not good. So if the method or the motive for this killing is just dumb, then you're like, oh, this whole movie was a waste of time. Like, is there really going to be a motive after the first movie? Like, because then there's no need for a sequel. But I really was impressed with how they circled it back and gave it a legitimate motive based on the backstory that was already presented in the first movie. Because in the first movie, when Billy is revealed as the killer, he states how, the affair took place, his mom abandoned him, and all of that stuff. And then she comes back and all of that stuff plays back into the motive. So I thought it was really well done. And I thought it was a good motive to set up the end of the film. What did you think about the climax and the reveal?
Yeah, I liked that. Like you said, it's in the first movie. It's mentioned obviously a couple of times that his mother's left. Like when she gives when he gives Sidney that speech in the first movie. I know what it was like when my mother left, and she obviously, the whole argument. So it's only mentioned a couple of times. So it's kind of something you do forget about until she comes back into it. It is one of those sort of moments, realizing who she is and why she's doing it. I also liked why I like the reveal as well is it's quite reminiscent of the first Friday the 13th. Because everyone always thinks, oh yeah, it was Jason Voorhees, but in the first film it was Mrs. Voorhees that was doing it.
Yes.
So I thought that was like a really nice, it was reminiscent of that as well.
No, that's right, and you're right too, because that was a clever line that he talked about, about serial killers, and they said Jason Voorhees, and he's like, no, Jason Voorhees wasn't the killer. No. It was Mrs. Voorhees, not till the second movie. That's great too, and let me get back to that too, because I'm trying to think if I noted any Easter eggs in Scream 2. Oh, yes, I did actually. Let me pull out my notebook because I knew I was going to forget. Let's see. So yeah, we talked about sequels. Psycho. So the Stab movie. So Heather Graham plays the Drew Barrymore character in Stab.
Yeah.
The movie with him. So they basically mimic the scene from Psycho, not the end of the scene, but the beginning of the scene. There's a close up of the faucet, the shower comes on, the water hits the ground, and then she disrobes, just like in Psycho. So I'm like, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but that reminded me of Psycho right when I saw it. It's really subtle, but that's one that I oh, and my other favorite callback, which was a funny one. In Scream 1, Sydney has a throwaway line when they were talking about how this would make a great movie. If you remember her line, they were talking about who would play them.
Yes.
And Sydney May has a throwaway line of, well, knowing my luck, Tori Spelling will play me in the movie. And lo and behold, it was Tori Spelling with a great cameo. So props to Tori Spelling, one, for having a good sense of humor about it and actually doing it. So that was a great callback as well. So those are the two I think I noticed. Did you notice any other? You already mentioned a couple. Did you notice any other horror movie? I saw Nosferatu in there too. That's the other thing I noticed too.
It's not necessarily horror, but obviously because it was the 90s and it was Courtney Cox, and outside of Scream, she was doing Friends, the huge show Friends. There's a couple of Easter eggs there as well relating to Friends, if you notice, because in the Stab movies, I'm pretty sure it's David Schwimmer, who was Ross, obviously, who plays Dewey. And there's a line then, I think somebody says something to her about, oh, your nude photos leaked.
Yes.
And she goes, it was Jennifer Aniston's body, my head. And it's like, obviously, that's Rachel. So that was an Easter egg I liked as well, the Friends references.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I remember that line towards the because that was a funny throwaway. Yeah, thanks I didn't note that one too. Thank you. Yeah, so two Friends references there. You're correct. So, yeah, like I said, I don't know if they were doing any more because I noticed the only reason I noted Nosferatu is because there was several moments in the movie where something on TV that was playing was scenes from that film, which is obviously a classic in the horror genre from the silent film from the 20s. But I don't think there was any other direct references in the movie other than showing Nosferatu in the background. But again, I love the reveal. I think Scream 2 is good. Is it as good as the first one? I would probably say no, but not because I think it's a terrible movie or that it's worse per se. I think it's just, like you said, it's always challenging to recreate something that successful, but I think it does as good a job as you could probably do. I don't think there's not something that I'm going, God, it should have done this or it should have done that. So while I might say, and I'm always partial to, and I kind of agree with the theme of Scream 2 is it's very rare that I like sequels better than the first movies. I mean, there are some exceptions. I actually agree with the Aliens exception. I do like Alien a lot, but I think Aliens is a superior movie or a more entertaining movie.
The one that always got me when we're saying about sequels, I always think it during that scene as well, is Toy Story 2.
Great exception. Toy Story 2 is phenomenal. I
loved that. Yeah, Toy Story 2.
And a quick aside on Toy Story 2, because I'd like this is my film geek again. It's funny too, because at the time that movie came out, so Toy Story came out in 95. And Pixar was still independent of Disney. Now they had a contract with Disney to distribute their films. So at the time in the mid 90s, so there was after the renaissance of the Disney animation, so which began 89 with Little Mermaid, then Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King. That when they were having that string, when they just came back to life as an animation studio, they had a unfortunate habit though of making direct to video sequels to their big hit movies. So they were released direct to video, lower budget, lower animation quality, not great stories. Some of them I don't know, a lot of people like Return to Jafar, which is the second Aladdin.
the sequel to Aladdin. But Toy Story 2 was originally going to be a direct-to-video sequel to the first one. So John Lasseter, the head of Pixar at the time, had heard this and saw what they were going to do. And he said, so Pixar obviously has a high bar for quality. You know, if you know the Pixar process, I think they do it. They have basically what they do is they have scores of people that come up with stories. They kind of go through a committee to kind of get the best stories out there. There's a very deliberate process that they go through to get movies made at Pixar.
Yeah.
So when John Lasseter found that out, he said, no, you're not doing that. If you're going to do that, then we're not making a sequel to Toy Story. It's going to be a feature length film, or it's not going to happen. So Disney's like, okay. So they relooked at it again. They got back in control of it, and Toy Story 2 is a good. It's strong. Now the thing about Toy Story, yeah, it's strong. But the thing about that, and then you get Toy Story 3, which to me, the end of that movie still chokes me up. Like I've never. That's one of the first times watching an animated film that I got choked up at the end of a movie. It's just unbelievably done. Which is why I was unfortunately not a fan of Toy Story 4, but they should have stopped at 3. We'll get into that another day. I was not a fan of 4, but Toy Story 3 was phenomenal. But yeah, like you said, Toy Story 2, strong sequel, and you can. I mean, Toy Story, the first one, I'm always going to be partial to the first one because it was so original and so well done, and just the premise of toys being alive when they're not being interacted with, it was just brilliantly done. But yeah, Toy Story 2 is a great example. But yeah, like I said, sequels are tough. Normally they don't surpass the original. I think for me, a sequel, as long as it's a strong movie on its own, I'll enjoy it, you know, and like I said, characters you want to revisit, it's great. But yeah, but I love that theme. But I think Scream 2 does as good a job as you can do with a sequel to a very successful franchise and kind of furthering story. And like I said, what helps it is the theme of sequels in this movie. So you still get kind of, you know, you get kind of the same things, but you get some new stuff too. And I think there was enough new stuff in Scream 2 to make it kind of stronger. Like I said, the reveal gives it, you know, major hype for me. That's what really, you know, like I said, that would have kept the movie from either being really good or just a sequel that was unnecessary. So I think it gets a lot of points from me for the reveal in the end. So for me, I'm actually going to rate this movie. I'm going to give it 4 as well. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5, even though I like Scream 1 a little more. I don't think it's 3.5. I think it's not enough for me. So I'm actually going to give it 4 as well out of 5. That's my rating. What's yours?
I think mine is definitely a 4 as well. Like, it's not if we're just looking at just this genre, it's not my favorite sequel, but like you said, if you were just looking at it standalone as a film on its own, it is really good. It's enjoyable. It keeps to the same vibe, but, you know, gives you something new. So yeah, it's definitely a strong 4 for me as well.
Perfect. No, that's great. So it sounds good. So we'll definitely, I know with the sequel talk I got off the bat, maybe we'll do a show on just sequels. You and I can pick our favorite sequels, because I think we have some good opinions on those, and you see a bunch of different movies as well. Like I said, we'll do one probably. I like to do we'll do a non-horror podcast, you and I, because I think it'll be fun to kind of get out of. I want to keep doing these because these are great. I love doing these, but I think I want to hear some of your thoughts on some other movies. I know I know you don't only just watch horror movies. Obviously, you have a pretty vast knowledge of other movies, so we'll definitely get your thoughts on that. So again, that's our thoughts on Scream 1 and 2. So we're both in agreement actually on ratings. So if you haven't seen it, 4 stars for each. Like you said, I gave a warning on spoilers in the first one. I said reveal. So hopefully on this second one, you knew to stop it when I said reveal and come back if you haven't seen the movies. I'm assuming anyone listening to this podcast has probably seen both of those movies already. And at the very minimum, it make you want to revisit them. I was able to watch it here in the United States on HBO Max. So if you have that, it's streaming now there. Or like I said, you can always rent it on wherever you get VOD, Amazon, Hulu, or not Hulu, excuse me, Amazon, Vudu or whatever in the United States. Now in the UK, I'm not sure how the streaming works over there. Do you own those movies, or were you able to watch it streaming? How did you get them?
To stream, it would have to be Amazon Prime Rent or Buy over in the UK.
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap this up, I want Niamh, if you go ahead and tell everybody about your blog and where they can find it, where they can follow you on social media.
Okay, so once again, like I said, it's crimeinmypocket.com, just to the actual blog, and you can follow me then on Twitter and Instagram at Crime in My Pocket.
Fantastic. And before I sign off, obviously you can follow me on Twitter at Bend Your Ear Pod. That's also the handle for Instagram. There's a Facebook page and a YouTube channel. So if you can like, subscribe, that'd be great as well. That helps. And if you listen to this podcast on especially Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. That's a great way you can help independent podcasters like us receive a higher, what's the word I'm looking for? Exposure when people search out for new podcasts. That's the word I'm looking for. And again, really check out her blog. If you're true crime, I know is one of the biggest genres in the world, whether it's podcasting or Netflix. Her blog is one of the best. If you're interested in it, it's easy to read. It's well researched. Like I said, I read her case on Dennehy, her blog, and I blew through it. It's an easy read. I highly recommend it. So definitely check it out. Also check out her contributions to this podcast. I'm very grateful for her for taking the time to do this. We've done several episodes. We do our Halloween specials. We've done 2 already. So I'm already looking forward to the next one later this year. Check those out. They're on the feed there. We've done, like I said, we've done John Carpenter movie and one other horror film. So we're going to keep that up until we run out of John Carpenter movies anyway. So I'm looking forward to that. And like I said, our latest episode 65 was her flying solo as the host. Talking about I Know What You Did Last Summer and I Still Know What You Did Last Summer. So in keeping with the 90s horror theme, check that out. And then, after you listen to this episode, again, she will be a recurring guest on here or be hosting on her own. So again, Niamh, I want to thank you for that. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I know that takes time to research and put those up there. So I really appreciate you contributing to the show in that way. It's a big contribution and I do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me on the show as well. Thank you to your audience and to you for having me on. I always have a lot of fun recording these.
Fantastic. All right. Well, then everybody take care. Have a good week. And we will definitely be seeing you soon.
Thank you for listening to the show. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts or any other app, please take a moment to rate and review. This is a quick and easy way you can help the show attain a higher profile in searches when people are seeking out new podcasts. Another way you can help raise the profile of the podcast if you enjoyed what you heard or you think a friend might like it is to share the episode on your social media. This is another easy way to help the show reach a wider audience. The podcast is available on the following apps: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and CastBox. The show is also available on both YouTube and Facebook. Episodes can also be downloaded directly from the website at www.letmebendyourear.com. If you want to email the show, the email is bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you for listening, and I hope everyone has a great week.